Hello and welcome to another episode of Sum of Our Parts. I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Jim.
Apologies for our absence last week. We were unsuccessfully trying to mount a takeover of the Disney corporate board. And here we are. And this week it is my pick again. So I picked an old favorite of mine, Steel Magnolias.
So, Lindsay, I'm going to ask you, and because this movie came out before you were even born. So,
Mm-hmm.
when did you see this movie?
Can't pinpoint exactly, but I definitely saw it when I was a kid growing up. I had a babysitter named Miss Mary, who was an old lady. She was born in 1932, so she was in her 60s and 70s the whole time I knew her. I went to her from when I was 3 months old until I was 11 and old enough to stay home before and after school myself. And she had also babysat like my uncles. She knew my mom and my aunt when they were kids. So we watched a lot of like old stuff. So I watched it for the first time at her house with her. Probably it came on TV, or maybe she owned it. She was not usually one for buying new movies. She was one for watching things on TV and taping them. We did the Price is Right. We watched like old black and white movies and we watched this one. I know this I definitely watched with her for the first time. So I think that's part of why it sort of holds a special place in my heart because it makes me think of growing up and like going to Miss Mary's house and watching it with her.
Oh, that's nice. So, and I can honestly say, I don't think I saw this at the movie theater the first time. I'm sure it must have been on TV. We may have rented it when it came out on VHS. So,
Mm.
I do like Sally Field, but I don't recall seeing this one at the movie theater.
I love Sally Field. I think that's part of why I enjoy her. Like growing up watching this, between this and Mrs. Doubtfire is I love Sally Field. And we've talked about I have a lot of blind spots to make up with Sally Field, but I do love her in, both of those movies that I've seen a million times. I think her performances are great. And I think this movie has so many really amazing people in it. Obviously, just sort of the main cast. You have Sally Field, you have sort of Julia Roberts in her early period. You have Olympia Dukakis, Shirley MacLaine, Daryl Hannah, and of course, Dolly Parton. And then even supporting cast, you have like Sam Shepard and Tom Skerritt and Dylan McDermott
A very young
too.
Dylan McDermott.
Yes, yes. So a lot of like really, really good people, all I think doing really good performances. I mean, Sam Shepard, we don't see a lot of him because he's hiding in his bedroom. But I think everybody really does sort of show up in this movie for sure.
Agreed. When I watched the movie again, it's been years, and I was making notes about the cast, and again, I'm like you. I like Tom Skerritt in anything. I remember first he was in MASH, the original
Mm,
movie, and in Alien, and as the
mm.
the commander. And then also there's the bartender, which I kept thinking he looked familiar later on in the movie. I don't know if you ever watched The Mummy with Brendan Fraser,
Oh, yes.
but he
Yes.
was Benny, the
Oh,
his like cohort, the guy who abandoned him at the battle. That was the same actor, because I looked it up because I thought he kept
yes.
reminding me of someone,
Sammy DeSoto.
Sammy DeSoto, and it was Benny from The Mummy.
I haven't
But
watched The Mummy in a while, but I have to watch again to
yeah, that's one of my
buy
favorite
him.
movies. Of that one. But anyway, so back to the cast though. But yeah, you're right. And Olympia Dukakis was doing a lot of things at that time, and
Hmm.
then
Hmm.
like you said, Daryl Hannah and Julia Roberts were just coming out. But Sally Field was like really hitting her stride. I think at that point, she'd done Places in the Heart, I believe, or that was
Hmm.
coming up, and then of course she'd done Norma Ray.
Hmm.
Um, but uh, but always turned in, yeah, just a great performance every time. I think that she went into a role, even later on when she played Mary Todd Lincoln,
Hmm. Yeah.
with uh, Daniel Day Lewis.
Yeah. I think she's really good. And of course, we'll talk about like the funeral scene at some point in more
Mm,
detail. But I think just like her shifting in like tone and emotion, just back and forth, is just like so good. Because she does that. That's one of my favorite things that she does in Mrs. Doubtfire too. Like at the end when she finds out that Mrs. Doubtfire is Daniel.
Hmm.
And there's a moment where she says, I gotta get out of here, but she says it 3 times. And like, she's like, I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here, like in different tones. And it's so funny. And I think like that dynamic that she can bring is part of what I think makes me like her so much.
I agree. And I was, when I was watching the movie again, I noticed a lot too of her facial expressions, just her reaction when someone says something, and how you could just, you could see it all there in her face.
Hmm. Hmm.
Whether it's joy or disappointment or pain or whatever it may be, but you could tell just by looking at her face without her having to say any words or anything, that you can know what emotion she was feeling or what she was expressing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you get that like from jump with her,
Hmm.
like when they're doing all the wedding setup and she's like harried and trying to figure things out, and everyone is like coming to her for everything. I just love watching her in this movie. And she's such like the emotional center of it. And I think one thing that I think we both talked about that we noticed is the importance of Annelle, which is Daryl Hannah's character, as sort of like an entry point to the movie.
Hmm.
Because I think both of us maybe didn't remember until we rewatched this time that the movie opens with her like walking through town to go to Truvy's beauty spot.
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't recall that that's how the movie opened, and it's from her perspective that we see the town and everything
Mhm.
going on with the. She goes by the house where they're preparing for the wedding and so on and so
Mhm.
forth, and yeah, it's through her eyes that we sort of we meet all the main characters, I guess, to uh,
Yeah.
in that way.
Yeah. And then at the end, the end of it is her leaving the Easter egg hunt to go have a baby. So it is like we sort of begin and end. We enter and exit with Annelle coming into town and then leaving the event. So that's, I think, an interesting thing that I hadn't noticed before. And something else I hadn't noticed before that I think is probably very obvious, but it just is not something I attended to before, was just the use of holidays to show the passage of time. So when we start for the wedding, it's also Easter time because we have all the Truvy has all the eggs that she's giving to Clary, and
Oh gosh.
Weezer breaks them all. And then when we move forward, it's Christmas time, and that's when Shelby comes back for the festival. And she's pregnant, and then it's summer, like July 4th, and Jack Jr.'s like a year old, and then it's Halloween, and that's when Shelby goes to the hospital and then dies, and then at the end it's Easter again. So it does show this whole like cycle of time with holidays as a kind of benchmark to sort of show like more easily communicate the passage of time without having to do, some movies it's like 3 months later or whatever, have
Right.
text on the screen, but this was like an easy, clear way to communicate the passage of time. And it wasn't something that I like paid attention to consciously before, but I was like, oh, it's Easter and then it's Christmas and then it's July 4th. I was like, oh, that's clever. That's
What
an easy way to tell us that time passed.
One of the things that it, like when I watched it again and I saw at the very beginning, I asked myself, what time of the year was this? Because Shirley MacLaine's character was wearing a mink coat over her bib
Yes.
overalls, and Hub was wearing a sweater vest and like a jacket. It's like, is it like 20 degrees outside? Because it looked like and I know it's set in the South, and I don't think it ever gets below 50 there. I'm not sure,
Yeah. Maybe it
but it
was an early Easter. It was a
maybe.
March Easter.
But then later on, even at Christmas time, they're all just wearing maybe light sweaters and nobody's wearing a heavier coat, but it looked like they were dressed warmer for Easter than they were for Christmas time. So, or
Yeah.
for Halloween. But
That's
anyway,
true.
so
That's true.
it
That's a
just
good
struck me
point.
as kind of odd that, especially when Wheezy, came roaring in her entrance scene. She's wearing those bib overalls, which is, by the way, we used to call it a West Virginia tuxedo. Um, if you wore it with a shirt anyway. If you wore it without a shirt, it was just your summer outfit. But she comes running across with her dog, and then she has that mink coat on, which was a great outfit. And then whoever did whatever they did to the dog to make it look like it was molting, that was fabulous, because
Oh my.
that dog did look awful.
It
So
did. It did.
I
I
felt so
will
bad for the
say,
dog.
I know. Weezer did say that she later said like she's an old Southern woman, so she gets to like wear ugly clothes and crazy hats
That's true.
um and grow vegetables. But yeah, I mean, I think just from the beginning, the image of Tom Skerritt as Drum Eaton shooting birds
Oh,
so that they wouldn't, because Shelby doesn't want them in the trees for the reception so they don't poop on people, is just like hilarious and ridiculous. And Weezer just like barreling in to take issue
yeah, that
with that.
he was driving her dog crazy, and that's the reason it was losing its fur and making her crazy. So
Yes.
the other
So
thing I noticed I was looking at, I know it was just something odd. They were taking the trash out at the very beginning. They were out of the house for getting ready for the reception.
mhm.
I have the same trash can. Trash cans haven't changed evidently in 35 years. So it just made, I was thinking, really that we haven't gone to a cutting edge technology in trash cans. They all still look like that. Look like a Rubbermaid, whatever it is with the lid. So,
Who knew? But yeah, I think just those first few scenes where we meet everyone are just such good kind of encapsulations of their personality, right? Like we see Annelle is sort of like unsure and mousy and like, you
oh
know,
yeah.
and then Truvy is just like kind of warm and welcoming and funny with her little quips. There is no such thing as natural beauty. Like I forget who she's talking about. She's like, oh, when it comes to suffering, she is right up there with Elizabeth Taylor. And
Oh,
then
I remember it, but yeah, I'm like you. I don't remember who she
I
spoke that
forget who
about.
she was talking about, but
Yeah.
and then like Clary comes up and immediately starts gossiping about
Oh, I
like
know.
she's the new mayor's wife and we hate her. It's like you know what you're getting immediately, right? Like I said, already said, Sally Field as Malin is just like flitting all around, trying to hiding the gun. As soon as the gun's set out, she's like, no, we need to put
Yeah,
this
we put
away.
this away.
And then Shelby being demanding. And then everyone gathers at the beauty shop, of course, when we get, I think, one of the most iconic scenes of the movie. I think feel like this initial beauty shop scene and then the cemetery scenes are the ones that stand out to me as like the most memorable ones.
Agreed.
Like the most iconic hypoglycemic episode, perhaps in cinema history here.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah, when she starts to react like that, and how they deal with it. And then it's
yes.
like everyone knows. Everyone just knows
Hmm.
what to do.
They just swooped in, pull out candy, go get the orange juice. And
Right.
I think that this is also you get a really good window into like Malin and Shelby's relationship as mother and daughter. And I think this carries on throughout
Mm-hmm.
the rest of the time. Like she is like Shelby is being mean to her and like saying mean things. And she's just like, "Mm-mm,
Mm-hmm.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
okay." I forget what exactly she said. I think I wrote it down. She's just like, cooperate, please. She's like,
I
I'm gonna
think
hit you or something. She's like, I'd like to see you
see
try.
what
So she's still kind of like messing with her, joking with her, even when,
in the throes of an
yeah,
episode. So and
yeah.
I don't know, working and around patients and so on. Sometimes I've seen patients come in with their sugar level really goes out of whack, and then they do sort of go into an episode where they really don't know what they're saying or what they're doing.
Hmm.
And I think part of that was to show that too, that because she said when she finally sort of cleared up, she said, "Oh, Mama, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean." And she knew she didn't mean to say those things. It was just a reaction because of her insulin level,
Yeah, yeah.
or
I,
at least that's the way I took it. That
yeah, no,
it
for
wasn't
sure.
that what she wasn't being mean to be mean. She was mean because she was just not herself.
Yeah, yeah. And that like irritability and stuff that comes up a lot when people are low. And it can
Hmm.
come up when they're high too. in
If it's
in
out of
their
whack.
sugar levels. But yeah, no, that whole part, like, don't talk about me like I'm not here.
Oh, I know. And the look on her face, because when she realizes it's coming on and there's nothing she
Mhm.
can do about it.
She goes kind of like a little vacant, like a little blank in the
Hmm.
face. But yeah, drink your juice, Shelby, I think is one of the like iconic things. Like
Yeah.
I say it sometimes when it like seems
Oh,
like recently what happened on the reunion of the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, one of the women kind of fell out. She had like her blood pressure went low and she was like shaking. And they
hmm.
start making her drink something. And I was someone else, I was texting someone who was watching it with me and I was like, drink your juice, Shelby. Because they're like making her drink something. And I was like, this is exactly it. Like holding her face and dumping
Mm-hmm.
juice into her mouth. But
Exactly.
I
So,
think also the whole scene, even before that though, the like my colors are blush and bashful,
oh, and
pink
they're
and pink.
pink.
And it looks like the church was hosed down with Pepto-Bismol.
Pepto-Bismol. Yeah, pink is
Pink
my
is my
signature color.
signature color. Yes. I think all of that. But I think too, it sets kind of the tone for the movie, with the sort of like being able to joke a little bit about things that are serious. Because even before that, too, Clary is talking about what she's going to do with all of her money.
Mm-hmm.
And she's talking about buying the radio station to do like color commentary for football. She's like, it's hard to parlay football into a reason to live. And so it's like she's joking about like being a widow and like being very sad.
Right, and
Uh,
not have anything to live for or to
yeah,
have any
exactly.
dreams or goals. And
Yeah.
yeah.
But it's all like a joking tone. And I did read when I was kind of reading sort of background on things that the writer Robert Harling, he had gone to law school.
Mm-hmm.
And the quote was saying like not a lot of laughs in Brown versus the Board of Education. So it was like I'm reading all this dry stuff, so it was intentional to incorporate a lot of the humor into the sad stuff, just because it's like to make it a little more dynamic, to make it a little more lifelike and not just like dry and droll and kind of down in the doldrums. And that for me is one of the reasons why I love this movie. Because
Okay.
that combination, the like the funny sad to me is like I think my favorite tone. Like I am a person who I am a big like laugh to keep from crying person. You know, I joke anytime and anywhere. When all my grandparents died, I did eulogies at all of their funerals, and there was definitely at least one joke in like every one because it's just that's just who I am as a person, and I think that's also like my relationship with people too.
Sure.
So I appreciate seeing this movie like capturing that really well. Like I
And it
think
seemed like all of them did that. They were all
mhm,
either self-deprecating or they would not pick on, but they would not turn on each other, but they would like sort of like, oh, well, do, blame her or,
yeah.
and later on after the funeral, when Malin
Mhm.
has the crying and stuff, and then, she talks about how she just wants to hit someone or hit
Yes.
something.
Yes. Yes. And I think that at the after that scene, Dolly Parton Truvy says like laughter through tears is my favorite emotion or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yes, exactly that. But let's talk about the funeral scene because I think that's the other like iconic moment. So for people who haven't seen it, first of all, we're spoiling the whole movie, so you should probably pause this and go watch
Oh,
it.
good point. Yeah. If you
Um,
haven't seen the movie, stop now.
Yeah. To be fair, it came out in 1989, so if you haven't seen it, that's your fault at this point.
Exactly.
Um, but anyways, so Shelby, Julia Roberts has died. She died because she had a baby, which like she knew was risky, and that was always sort of the plan that she wasn't going to, and then she does. It's insinuated that she does it for her husband in some ways. Because she says when she tells Malin that she's pregnant, she says like, I think it'll make things better or something like that.
She does. And so while you're on that, I was going to ask you, because I didn't pick up on that, of course, until just now rewatching it. Do you
Yeah.
think that indicated there was some sort of marital issue then between the two of them about them not being able to have children? Because it seemed like at the beginning of this, he was on board with her not being able to have children or shouldn't have children. And I wondered, was this an indication of some other marital problem? And then she was hoping that would help it,
Yeah,
you
I
know.
think like you, I hadn't really picked up on it until this watch, but she very does definitively say like, I think this will make things better, which does
Mm-hmm.
sound like there was like a marital issue. And maybe she says that like they look into adoption, but no judge is going to give a baby to like a woman as sick as me and stuff like that. So maybe when those other avenues didn't seem to be an option anymore, then it that became a problem.
Maybe
But
he
yeah, that wasn't something that I ever had really noticed before until this point, which I thought was interesting because I'm like
mm-hmm.
that.
Because
It,
she knew it was at risk, but and then and she did express the biggest desire was for her to have children,
mhm.
but then maybe I thought if her husband had supported her and so on and so forth, and then maybe she wouldn't have gone through with it, but maybe she did it for another reason besides just wanting to have a child. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that was definitely the insinuation. So
hmm
it's interesting. That's
yeah,
definitely a new thing to think about. And I think, of course, that like brings with it other like questions and things. But
right.
in any case, she has her baby, her kidneys fail, and despite getting a transplanted kidney from her mother, Malin, she dies. It's very sad. She was like on life support. They had to make the decision to withdraw. And then they have the funeral, and of course, like everybody's there in the
Mm,
town. And then at the end of it, the women all kind of gather around Malin, and she first starts with like, I'm fine,
yeah,
which
the
typical, right?
the typical, right, the stoic, rock of the family.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, because she on the part when they withdraw life support, like the men couldn't even stay in the room,
Mm,
and she stays there
and that
until,
was very poignant, I thought,
yeah.
without saying a word. They
Hmm.
just they went in, they looked, and then they left, and then she was still there when
She's there
everything stopped.
until the very last moment. And
Hmm.
then immediately is like, okay, we need to call this person for the funeral. Where's Jack Jr.? I'm gonna go pick him up. So she like springs into action, which I think is very like mom,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah,
a mom thing to do. But so she says she's fine. And then Annelle at this point in the movie has become like a born again Christian and is trying to help in her way, but in a way that I think people who have lost people know that there are people who say things that they think are trying to be helpful, and it is just like grating, and you want to be like, shut the hell up. Like, that is the last thing
exactly.
I need to hear. And she's like, oh, she's in a better place, and da 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 da. Melin's like, well, I'd rather have her here.
Right. I must be selfish, or yeah, I must
Yeah.
be a bad person because I don't feel that way. So,
Right, right. And she's like, thank you though, but and she says like her mind is like, we need to move forward, get on with things. Shelby wouldn't want us to like dwell on this, but my heart isn't hearing that.
hmm
Um and I think this part, obviously I've seen this a million times, but like this line I think became like extra poignant when like watching it this time and paying closer attention. But she says that like, how lucky was I to like be there when this creature entered the world, and then also when she drifted out of it.
yes.
And I think again, like that part of her staying, like just staying in the room and like just stroking her hand was really, really poignant. And I
Hmm.
think that was the part that sort of got me this time. This is definitely like a tearjerker movie for sure. It's a good, if you need to squeeze out a few tears, you're feeling a little blocked. I think this is a good movie to turn on and get the emotions flowing a little bit.
Agreed.
Um, but that point like really got me this time because I was like, wow, that is sort of like sort of a full circle kind of thing, and
Hmm.
also one that like you don't want to have as a parent.
Well, everyone says that no parent should ever have to bury their child.
Yeah, and then I think here's sort of where it kind of picks up, and she's like, and this again I think goes back to what I appreciate about Sally Field's performance, because she's like sort of quiet and contemplative, and then she's like, I'm fine, I'm so fine I could run all the way to Texas and back, but my daughter can't, and she never could, and I'm
Hmm.
very mad, and I want to know why. It's like she goes through all the stages of grief like in one scene,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. From
Like the
all the
denial,
stages of
bargaining, anger,
acceptance.
anger,
Wait a minute.
depression is one of them.
Yeah,
Denial,
yeah.
bargaining, anger, depression, acceptance. I was like, oh no, there's five. But yeah, she like goes through all of them just in this one scene. But I think that part too, to me, felt very relatable.
Hmm.
The anger part of it.
Sure.
And I think that is then perhaps under, I mean, obviously it's like in the stages of grief, but I think that is perhaps an under like represented or portrayed part of it.
Hmm.
But I think for me, it's something that I've related to before and definitely felt in the context of losing someone, in the context of grief for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Because it just, doesn't all make sense.
It doesn't, and everyone's lost someone that's been close and dear to them, and then there's you sit there and you're angry because, especially if it wasn't anticipated or if it wasn't
Hmm.
expected, even if it was from a a serious illness, or
Mhm.
why did they have to, end up that way? There's other people that, you know, live a long life, and you think, maybe they shouldn't, or whatever it may
Mhm.
be, but yeah. And then,
Yeah. Or it's like, I felt before like this is such a good person that just died. There are people around who are terrible people.
right. And
And
who are
and
still,
yet
yet
they're
here they
kicking.
are. Yeah. And this person who, certainly made a better place, and made the world a better place by their being in it, is no longer there. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for Malin too, and I think this probably comes up for people, but like, thinking about Shelby, like the deck was kind of stacked against her from the beginning.
hmm,
Um, she
yeah,
was always sick.
sick. And I read in the thing, it was type 1 diabetes as opposed to
Hmm.
type 2. With type 2 is manageable, you can, but type 1 is, very debilitating, or can
Yeah.
be, if it's not managed.
Yeah. And type one, like type two, some people get type two because of like, when they're an adult because of like their lifestyle and stuff. Type one is typically like juvenile diabetes.
Juvenile
So it's like,
diabetes.
you're a kid and you're
So
just
she's
born
probably had this
born
all
like
that
this.
all along. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So it's been something involved in her life the whole
hmm,
time. So I think there's got to be anger about that to like have your child have this like
uh, yeah,
impediment, I guess,
right. And
the whole
wasn't
time.
able to, do other things
Mhm.
or do things that other children could do at that
Yeah.
time. So,
Yeah. And I will just want to interject here with like a question that came up for me, and we've talked about it briefly, but like in the year 2020, like people with type 1 diabetes have children and are
it,
fine. I was like, wait, what is like, I was like, did people, certainly we had discovered insulin before 1989.
or the fact that maybe, that hopefully it wasn't a comment on where they lived and the quality of medical care available at that time in that
Could be
hospital.
like, what is going on in Chinkapin Parish, in this fictional town in Northwest Louisiana?
Right.
But I will say the issue was like her kidneys, I guess. It was so far along that
Yeah.
it had destroyed her kidneys and her kidneys couldn't hold up to having a baby. Because I did Google like, can people with kidney failure have children? And they say that they usually recommend that you don't. So
Oh, okay.
that makes more sense to me. It was the kidney issue because I was like, I like off the top of my head know someone who had a baby like last year with type 1 diabetes
With
and is
type 1
fine.
diabetes, and is doing well. So, well,
Yeah,
that's
so I think the implication is that Shelby's type 1 diabetes was so severe that it had really impacted her kidneys. And that was the impediment to having kids. So I do just want to bring that up because that was I was like, what the heck? Like
yeah.
1989 wasn't, it's not 1859. Like,
Yeah. I mean,
um, what's going on? But when I considered it from that angle, it made more sense. So we're just gonna assume that like whatever was going on with
right.
her
It
her
was the
diabetes, it
kidneys.
was,
The kidneys were
yeah,
or
yes,
beyond repair, and then some sort of, you know thing had happened with the,
yeah.
either it was a rejection of the donor kidney, or
Hmm.
whatever. So,
Yeah, yeah. Because also, Malin strikes me as a very conscientious parent, so she would have been on top of it
oh,
from
I'm sure.
from
Yeah.
jump. So I assume that it was just very bad.
Although there
Um,
was a scene, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, but there was a scene, and I can't remember. It was after the kidney transplant, and Shelby was talking to, it was someone, I thought she said something about, oh, it was very hard to keep up on the regimen or whatever of the medications because of, taking care of Jack Jr. and stuff, or,
mm,
but, and I thought, well, maybe she wasn't as diligent, and
mhm,
Malin was, they weren't in, she wasn't around her all the
yeah,
time. So maybe she had inadvertently neglected to maybe do what she was supposed to do to keep up on things. I don't know, but
that's true.
it kind of
That's
struck me that, that maybe she wasn't taking as good a care of herself as she should be.
Yeah, that's a possibility for sure. So
So,
back to the funeral scene. Here's where we get
sorry.
to the no, I started that diversion when we get back. So this is where she's sort of all over the place. She's like mad and wants to know why, and she's crying, and then she's just like, no, no. And this is what I say about like the dynamics. She's like screaming and crying, and then she's like, no, no, no. She's like, I'm so mad, I want to hit somebody. And this is where we get into like my favorite part. Clary, who's Olympia Dukakis, grabs Weezer, who is Shirley MacLaine, and it's like, slapper, Malin. And then Weezer's like, are you high, Clary? Which I say, that's also a quote that I use
I've
in
heard
my
you
life.
say
Are
that
you
actually. Yeah.
high?
So, are you
Um,
high?
like when my cats eat too much catnip and they're acting crazy. Are you
Oh,
high? Or, in other contexts, as applicable. But that is a quote for me. And then I can probably recite this part. Clary's like, slap him, Malin. We'll sell t-shirts and say, I slapped Weezer Boudreaux. What does she say? Half a Chinkapin parish would give their eye teeth for a whack at Weezer. And Weezer sort of wriggles out of her hold and stomps away. But Malin starts laughing.
uh-huh.
Everybody starts laughing, except for Weezer, because she's offended. But I think that for me, it's just like that shift, right? There's always something happening that is funny.
Yeah.
There's always like something absurd in life, I will say, right? Like all my grandparents died and all their funerals, like there's always somebody like singing in like a very weird way or like wearing something crazy or like at the last funeral I went to, there was this guy who I didn't know, but he came and was like shaking everybody in the family's hands at the end and he shakes my hand and then the next person and then the next person at the end puts his hand out to be shaken and the guy just walks away. And
Just
then so
ignored it.
yes. And then it was me and then a relative and that was her husband and she and I were just like, "Oh my gosh, left hanging." And then even later
Ooh.
in the day, it would just like pop up in our minds and just make us start laughing because it was like he was just like had his hand out and then just kind of like forlornly puts it down because he was skipped. But just like things like
I
that, it's
wonder
just
if there was a
always
history between the two of them.
no, I don't think that he knew him. I
Oh,
think
that
this is
he.
a person like
Oh,
we don't know this. I don't know this man. I don't think he knew this man because he had like married into the family. So like this is not someone we know. And he's just like weirdly picking who to shake hands
who to
with. And I
shake
was like,
hands
I thought
with?
he wasn't gonna shake my hand, but he did. And then I was like, okay, well, I guess he's shaking everybody's hand. And then it was like, no, he's not.
Nope.
He's
Ooh.
just he's just picking at random. I don't know. And he had like a very firm handshake. It was like weird. So I think that person was just strange.
Yeah.
But it made me laugh because like I'd been crying the whole time, and then that happens, and I
On.
was like, what the heck? It just like breaks the tension a little bit of just like, what is happening? Right? Like the absurdity of it. That I think
Uh-huh.
there's always something that bubbles up that way that's just like, wait, what?
What was that all about? Yeah.
What is happening? I'll give another example. When my grandfather died, who was one of my favorite people, like we hung out all the time. He used to always get on me for having my gas light on in my car, like driving with
Oh,
the
oh, you
light
were low on
on.
gas.
Yeah, and if he like sometimes he would like drop me off at the airport and then take my car to his house because he lived close. And if
Uh-huh.
that happened and my gas light came on, he would fill it up with gas
Fill it
and
up with
stuff.
gas.
And so the day of his funeral, I was going to be speaking and I was also baking for the reception after because
Uh-huh.
he enjoyed red velvet and I make good red velvet cupcakes. So I was making the cupcakes. Obviously, I'm running at the last minute, which is just who I am as a person. And I'm going and I don't get too far from my house and the gas light comes on. And it's like, ooh, I don't have
Oh,
time to stop for gas.
yeah.
But I check the GPS, it's 10 miles. I'm like, I can make it 10 miles. And worst comes to worst, my friend was in the car behind me,
Uh,
following me there. So I was like,
oh,
okay,
yeah.
worst comes to worst, I'm pulling over the side of the road, ditching my car, getting into
And
hers, and we're going the rest of the way. I
gotcha.
was just like, oh my God, please just let me get to this funeral that I have to speak at. I was just like, the irony. I did make it and I got gas in between like the funeral and the reception. But I was just like, of all the days for my gas light to come on, is
Well,
at the funeral of the person who nagged me all the time about having my gas light on.
maybe
Um,
maybe it was him saying to
I'm
you.
hoping it was sort of
It
like,
was
I
a
was just
sign.
like, man, I need to get to, can you just get me there,
Yeah.
please? I will stop letting my gas light come on so much. Just I can't be late to your funeral because that would be a problem. Because I think I talked first. So that would have been
Oh,
a real issue. But I was just like, oh my God. Just like the absurdity of life, just like these
yeah.
weird moments that occur even amongst like sad things. There's always just something something going on.
Well, and good for you for recognizing it though, and instead of, I think a lot of people maybe miss things like that though, and then in their time of grief for whatever reason, but then for you to be able to say, wait a minute, that was kind of odd that he just left a guy hanging without shaking his hand instead of not even noticing it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I think it speaks to you too of trying to look on the bright side of things, or to look for a positive note in even in the worst circumstances.
Yeah, I guess that's what I
Someone who
think.
sees the glass as half full as opposed to half empty, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, I think I'm always looking for a laugh for sure.
Well, good.
Um,
So you brought up
yeah.
about the red velvet cupcakes. You didn't make them in the shape of an armadillo, did you, by any
I
chance?
did not. I did not, and I would never. I should have done that for like a the last Halloween party I had. I should have done that. But the armadillo cake, I think also iconic, and I think something that people like. I've heard of people doing that like at weddings as
Yes.
a
A,
joke or like a tribute to
a
this.
tribute to the movie. Yes.
Yeah. So if I ever get married, I'm gonna have to do that. There has to be an armadillo cake,
I
because I do love red velvet also. So
well, I was, and so, and I expect, hopefully that I'll be there, and then I hope to get a slice of the armadillo cake.
yes, you can get the like when Weezer serves
Oh my God,
drum
that
the
was
butt
perfect. Yeah,
with a giant knife
with a
cuts it.
giant knife. Where she,
Um, but yeah, I think those like the beauty shop scene, the first beauty shop and
and
the funeral are the best. But I think that what really hit me this time is this movie is like so like dense with jokes. Like I feel like every
mm,
other line, especially Weezer's
mm,
dialogue,
oh,
is hilarious. Just like, and I think Shirley MacLaine is just like boom,
oh,
boom, 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 like
and,
rapid fire with
and
these
not so,
lines that are like I'm trying to like take notes. Every single thing she's saying is so funny. I'm like, it's hard to keep up.
and the way she delivers them. I mean, just it's not it's so much, that, and the dialogue is great, and I even made a
Mhm.
note of that throughout the whole movie, and of course you could tell that, because he did the screenplay, the writer. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, just the way she delivers it, and just what a, professional in any every sense of the word. So,
Yeah. I think that like I was trying to write down lines that made me laugh, especially, and like almost all of them are hers. Like even when she first goes to the beauty shop, Truvy's trying to say something nice to her, and she's like, "Don't try to get on my good side, Truvy. I no longer have one." She calls Drum Eatonton a boil on the butt of humanity.
humanity. Well, she said at one point she was, what was it? She said, I've just been in a bad mood for 40 years or
Yes,
something.
because I think Malin tells her she should come to Malin like works at their like counseling
Oh,
center or
to
whatever.
yeah,
And she's like, I'm not crazy. I've just been in a very bad mood for 40
for
years.
40 years. And then when she meets her old beau, remember after the
Oh, yes. Owen.
Shelby, yeah, Shelby, goes ahead and just, puts her head in a tiger's mouth, and then and decides to, reintroduce him. And she looks at him and she says, "My God, you look awful. Did you shrink?" And he goes, "You look great." She goes, "I'm not as nice as I used to be," or something like to that effect.
Yes, no, she's so funny. That was like the Christmas party. Yeah, the only
Yeah,
reason people are nice to me is because I have more money than God.
yeah.
I use more money than God a lot too. Uh, but yeah, and I think this I had as like a quote on my Clarice says this
Hmm.
at that Christmas party. I have this as a quote on my like one of my social medias before, but she was like talking about her own family. And Truvy's like, "You're talking about your own kin like that." And she said, if you don't have anything nice to say, come sit by me." And she
Was
says
we're
like her family's like they look like they're all carved out of cream cheese.
cream cheese, yeah, and then and it had like the picture of her nephew, and I guess his sister or whatever, and they all
Yeah.
do look, they're so, yeah, they all look like Ken and Barbie, it's like.
Yes.
And that was going to bring another thing though through, and of course I know the time of the decade it was, but my God, big hair
The
everywhere,
hair. Shelby's
hair.
hair when they first do it for the wedding before
Oh,
she messes it
oh,
up. I was like,
oh.
this is ginormous, but it is like it does feel very of the period because like
Well, and
I've seen pictures of like my mom and my aunt and like
my sister and my mom,
yeah.
but when Truvy has Daryl Hannah do her hair to see how it's like it's
It's
more poofy than I usually
it
do.
is so big.
Oh my God, it was, and then had the mask with the hairspray.
Yes.
I remember my mom and my sister when, because my mom would do my sister's hair sometimes, but I
Hmm.
remember having that, like when she would spray that spray, and of
Yeah.
course we were all, start choking and coughing in the
Hmm.
house because
That
that.
hairdo, there are pictures of one of my grandmothers. She would like go get, glamour shots. Like people would go
Hmm.
get like her, that's what her hair
Oh,
was. It was like
uh,
that, just like this big poof. The hair is crazy, and like the outfits. I love the at the wedding when they're talking about the new mayor's wife. And they're like,
hmm.
she that dress is probably $500 and she didn't even buy a girdle. It looks like two pigs fighting under a blanket when she's dancing.
Yes, that.
Mhm.
Oh, and speaking of the wedding, I was one of the scenes when they pull up in the car for them to go away.
With the condoms.
Well, not only that, but the guys are like shooting guns and they're wearing Civil War caps and stuff. And I even wrote down, well, that didn't age well.
No,
That
no. I
scene
did
wouldn't
notice that
play
one of the
today.
guys coming up for cake, I was like, what is this?
Yeah,
What
he
is
was wearing
this?
like a Civil War cappy, like the cap,
Yeah,
yeah, it was
the
and I was like,
Confederate cap,
yeah, a
of course, the
Confederate,
gray one.
exactly. Yeah, so yeah. And
Yeah,
then
no.
uh, I think one of the overlooked people and who doesn't have a big part, like you said, is Sam Shepard in it,
Mhm.
who's the very stoic and hardly has any dialogue. But at the end of it, when he goes to the funeral, when he asks
Mhm.
Truvy, he says, I thought I'd go to the funeral with you if that's okay. Because he never did anything with her, throughout the whole
Mhm.
movie. And then he tells how he would feel if something happened to her, like
Mm.
Shelby. And then you could see the tears in her eyes, like he really does care, or he really
Yeah,
does love me.
yeah. I
I
think
thought that was a very poignant scene.
I think I that was something that I noted too. Like there is a thing here about like showing up for people like throughout this
Exactly.
movie, right? Like
Right.
all like obviously the women, the six women, I think especially as like a core, but I think these other people in their lives too, like Spud, again, he's like in the bedroom watching TV the entire movie. He won't go
Right.
anywhere. He had like lost his job or something, and I guess the implication is that he's sort of struggling with that.
Right.
But he does nothing. But then, like at this moment of real need, he can show up and like be supportive of Trudy and also demonstrate that he like really does love her.
Yeah. That
Um,
that if something happened to her, that his life would be shattered.
yeah,
Because he said, I
yeah.
can't imagine going through something like that.
And
You know,
unfortunately, like it hopefully doesn't take things like that always for people to sort of come to those realizations, but sometimes it does. It is sort of like a jarring thing, I think.
it
Um,
does. I think
that
sometimes people get complacent, and then it
mhm,
takes something like that to sit there and make you think about your relationships, maybe, or about who you're close to, or how your feelings for them. And then as we all get older, I'm a firm believer in telling people how you feel about them before the time comes when you speak about them
yeah.
instead of speaking to them. So
Yeah, for sure, for
yeah,
sure.
you
And I
know.
think another example of that I hadn't thought about before, but Truvy's son, like at the beginning,
Mm.
she's like, "Can you take out the trash?" And he's like, "No, I can't." And he rides away on his motorcycle. But at the end, when Annelle is going into labor and her husband Sammy is in the bunny suit, it's Truvy's son on the motorcycle that
Motorcycle
that
that
picks
takes.
up the Easter bunny to drive after the truck so he
I
can go be
know.
there for the birth of his child. So it is like, people do kind of show up at
Yeah.
moments of need. And I think that to me is one of the things, all the women and like even, when they find out that Shelby's going to have a transplant from
Hmm.
Malin, they're all making food and stuff like, which is very like feels very like a sort of like southern like small town thing.
And you and I come from the same region, and in the Appalachians, and that is a real thing. When
Mm-hmm.
something happens, and whatever it may be, but that's the first thing is people start bringing food,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a funeral or a sickness or an illness in the family, and someone's left. Oh well, here have something, or do this. So
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
it's comforting. So, in that way, yeah, I noticed that too. When they were shopping for
All
how many
getting all
cans of
the
pork and
beans.
beans, he eats
Drum
them with
loves
every
pork and
meal.
beans. And
Yeah.
Weezer just starts putting them back because he's like, no.
Said how many things he eats them with every meal. So,
Yes. I loved at the end when she's talking about she's saying, I am pleasant. I saw Drum Eatonton at the Piggly Wiggly and I smiled at the son of a bitch.
Before I even knew what I was doing.
Yes. No, it's so God, Weezer has so many funny lines. That same scene, she says, I don't go see I think Clary wants her to go see a play. And she
Oh,
said, I don't
she
go
wants to
see
go to New
plays.
York.
Yes, she said we should go like take in some culture. And she's like, I don't want
Hmm.
to do that. I don't see plays because I can nap at home for free. I don't watch movies because all they got is naked people in them. And I don't read books because if they're any good, they'll be turned into a miniseries.
Miniseries.
She's just like everything she says is so funny. It's so funny.
Well, and she reminds me, her character reminds me a little bit of a great aunt that I had, who
Hmm.
was my grandfather's. I know it's kind of convoluted. My grandfather's brother's wife,
Hmm.
but she smoked and Shirley MacLaine's character smokes, and that was the other thing. They were smoking in the hospital. I don't know if you noticed that in
Hmm.
the waiting room where
Yeah.
she did, but she smoked with a cigarette holder at the wedding reception. And I remember my great
Hmm.
aunt had a cigarette holder that she smoked cigarettes with. So well, back then it was before they really put filters on cigarettes. So
Hmm.
if you smoked a cigarette, you'd get tobacco in your mouth. Men would, but women, if they used a cigarette holder, that didn't. They avoided that. So I know a little bit of trivia that nobody needed to know about smoking. So talking about Shirley MacLaine, then that's what I was looking through the nominations about. Like I know the movie was nominated for several. Julia Roberts won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, but Shirley MacLaine wasn't even nominated, and neither was Sally for an Oscar. She was nominated for a Golden Globe, but not for an Academy Award. Sally Field,
That's
which
kind
I
of crazy.
I know because I was looking at the performances. Not that Julia Roberts wasn't good, but I thought Sally Field was just as good, maybe, and is like a little bit of a sleeper. Maybe
Hmm.
Shirley MacLaine. It was sort of came across, and even Daryl Hannah. I thought because her evolution throughout the whole movie, from her character in the very beginning through her cycle, how she changed and her appearance changed and her demeanor
Hmm.
changed, all that. So that was like a little story unto itself.
Yeah. And she had a couple of good lines, like at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning when they all are, as soon as they hear her say her husband disappeared, everybody's like, hmm? Like
Mm-hmm.
ears open,
Mm-hmm.
antennas up, because it's gossip. And she explains it, and then she says, I will not let my personal tragedy interfere with me doing good hair. That part cracks me up. And then at the end, after the funeral, when she tells Weezer she should come to her church, and she said, you're probably going to make me like kill a chicken or something. And she said, not on your first visit. And Clarice like, that was a good one. That was a good one.
Uh-huh.
I think it's funny because she, especially at that point, she's just like sort of like proselytizing and all this stuff. So
But
it's nice to have her get a little zinger
a
in
little dig, yeah. And then
on
she
Weezer.
sort of became one of the group. She was sort
Hmm.
of taken into the fold, and then became like one of the members, so to speak, of the
Hmm.
inner circle. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think she had like a real arc. But yeah, I think that's the other reason, like you said, that Weezer reminds you of a Grant. I think, I spent a lot of time going to Kentucky and hanging out with like my grandmother and like great aunts and cousins and stuff. And like this is the vibe. And I think that's another reason why
mm-hmm.
this movie is so like important and one that resonates with me is because like those women feel very familiar. The little
I
the
agree.
the gossiping,
Right.
talking
And
talking a little shit.
talk dig doing throwing a little dirt on some people,
Yes.
and then
A little bit of bless your heart,
oh
you
yeah, oh
know.
yeah, yeah. And like to oh she, and then but yeah, behind them it's like, like you said about the lady with the dress, about I bet she spent $500 on that dress.
Couldn't even wear a girdle. No, like I can like hear in my head various like great aunts and cousins and grandmother just like saying things
Mm-hmm.
like that. And I can like assign like there's one my grandmother's cousin is an older like woman of means who reminds me of Clary. And certainly, the more grumbly ones remind me of Weezer
Wheezy.
and
Speaking of which, one of my favorite scenes, and I forgot about it through until I rewatched it, was it was just the look on everybody's faces in the locker room at the football game.
yes, I wrote that down.
That was so funny
Her
with
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 the
when she
mirror
with the compact, yes, when she
looking
pulled
at the
the
guy's butts.
I thought that, and I because at first I thought, well, why is she in the locker room? With
Mhm.
and then and Clary was just going on and on about the uniforms. Nobody
Yes.
wants to hear about that grape shit. They just want to know about touchdowns and injuries. So
Yes. Would you call this grape aubergine? Because she was taking her color commentary literally.
very seriously. And then she complained about the pants being white and they showed grass stains. So
Yes.
so so
I do
the
think about that sometimes. I have said that my dad's a high school football coach, and I was like, why do y'all wear white pants? They get so
that
dirty and they're see-through.
that's a good point. I don't know. That's I never thought about it either. So um,
Well, I think one time that conversation came up one time because I was like, I could see this boy's boxers. And my dad was like, why are you looking at his boxers? And I said, why are you wearing white pants that are see-through that I can
mm-hmm.
see his boxers?
There
Hmm.
you go.
If he wasn't wearing white pants, I wouldn't have known.
Exactly. I wouldn't have known he was wearing boxers
Exactly.
with little pink hearts on them.
hmm But no, that part is just like a fun little insert there
I
that is
know
just so
it's like you look at it and you think, what the hell?
I think, and I love the Clary and Weezer dynamic because I think that like Weezer's mean, so everyone is kind of mean to her. And then occasionally she has her moments where she's like,
What?
hey, or like when Shelby gets her hair cut short and Weezer was saying like, I
Oh,
wish my body would just fall apart. And then
and
later when they're shopping and she's like, I shouldn't have said that in front of Shelby. And Clary's like, don't worry about it. Nobody pays attention to you.
would you?
You're not a bad
Well,
person and nobody pays attention to
pays it.
you.
Well, and they were walking. Remember, she said to her to Clary, "Walk me home." And she
hmm
goes, you know what the world's like. And she goes, you just live right there. And she goes, yeah, but walk me home. And
Yeah.
I just thought that was, and she took her in arm and well, you're the one with the flashlight, and stuff like,
Yes. Yeah, because well, how am I supposed to get to my car over there? Well, you
yeah,
have the flashlight.
yeah, you have the flashlight.
One of
So
those little 80s like
I,
rectangle
I,
flashlights.
I was looking at that because I was thinking, well, what kind of flashlight? And then I saw that she had that. And I remember, those were a thing back
hmm
in those days.
Yeah. And at the end too, after she has volunteered Weezer for being
Oh,
punched
yeah.
slapped in the face by Malin to make her feel better, Weezer is like upset by that because certainly that's you don't
Yeah,
necessarily want to be volunteered to be slapped in the face
exactly. You don't want to be
and
somebody's
reminded that everyone would love to slap you in the face. So
that
she's
people would
upset.
pay money for that.
And then, Clarice just, well, I love you and stuff.
Yeah.
So I do like they are like a fun little dynamic duo between the two of them. And I think also, I will say you do see Weezer being empathetic, like at the Christmas party after Malin has just found out that Shelby's pregnant and she's upset about it.
Yeah.
And Weezer comes up and I think she's like, you got a reindeer up your butt or whatever. And
Yeah.
then that's when Drum announces that she's pregnant. And like Weezer, like Melinda doesn't have to say anything to Weezer. Like
Right.
she gets it. And
Yeah,
then
she
all the other
knows.
women come in celebrating, and Weezer is like, well, we're not really celebrating here.
Yeah. This is not a good thing.
Yeah. So she does have like, she's
Yeah.
empathetic. She cares, but
Yeah.
she's just like a grumbly person. That's like
Yeah.
just her
A
vibe. She's just been in a
cantankerous
very bad
lady.
mood for 40 years, as she said.
Thing. Well, she talked about her relationship. She married what the two most worthless men in the entire world and had the three most ungrateful children.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
She's so, she's so funny. Like everything she says is just, and I think partially because she delivers it all just like
oh
deadpan,
oh yeah.
just
And
serious.
well, and at the very beginning, when you first see her, I was trying to figure out. It looked like she had dirt on her face or something, and I never could figure out what
hmm
that was all about. Like it had the dog drug her through the mud or something or whatever. But I was looking at her face, and I thought, is the makeup bad or is that? It looked like splotches of dirt, or her face was
mm
dark in spots, and I just. But she's like oblivious to everything else. It's just the
hmm
world could be coming to an end, but if she has something to say, she's going to get it out. So,
Exactly, exactly. Just like her bursting in with that dog. And that's when Malin and Shelby are about to leave to go to Truvy's and they see her coming and turn around and go
turn
out the
around
back door.
back door, back door.
just for, and then she throws away all Drum's bullets, so that they have to resort
Oh
uh
God, the
shooting an
arrows with
arrow
the
covered in,
firecrackers.
yes, which then makes it worse, right? Because that's when like the dog drags her. She closes the trunk on all the eggs.
When and Drum can't hear, and
Yes.
he's deaf,
Oh
because
yeah, Daddy, it's time. It's time.
who gives this woman away? Her mother and I do.
Oh
And
yes.
everybody looks at him like he's an idiot.
He's been shooting and doing fireworks.
I
Uh,
know. You
so
can't.
funny. Also, a fun fact that I learned in researching for this, that the priest, who is the priest of both the wedding and the funeral, is Robert Hartling, the writer of this movie.
Yeah, and I did not know that at all. So that good for him for getting, writing himself into the movie, I guess, or getting the bit part. So, and because he
Yes.
was like, now I got to go back and rewatch the movie again to see, because I didn't pay any attention to the priest. I'll be honest with you. So it never
Yeah,
occurred
I
to me
had
like,
seen it when I was reading about him before I watched it, and then I like double checked in the the
oh,
credits at the
okay,
end. But I was like, oh, and
oh,
while I was watching it, I Googled him to see what he looked like, and I was like, oh yes, that is him.
that is
That
him.
priest is
Oh,
him.
okay.
But yeah, so just I guess we'll do a brief interlude about him. So he wrote this movie about his sister. So his sister basically was Shelby. She had type 1 diabetes and kidney issues. She had a baby. She had a kidney transplant, and then she died. And she had a very young son who was actually named also Robert. So it was named after
Named
him.
after her, after the author, correct?
Yeah.
The writer.
So he
Uh-huh.
wrote like a short story, which he turned
Oh,
into a play, and then it was off Broadway, I think, to like great critical acclaim, and then it was made into a movie all pretty quickly.
yeah,
Um,
I'd read something about, yeah, that he turned it into a play, like in just a very short, or
Mhm.
into a movie screenplay in a very short period of time, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah, like she died in 1985 and this movie came out in 1989. So all for
and,
it to be a short story, a play, and then a
and then
screenplay.
yeah, and then an Academy Award nominated movie.
Hmm.
And I haven't looked at, has he written anything else
Yes. And I think this speaks to sort of my taste. So he also wrote the movie Soap Dish.
oh,
Um,
okay,
he wrote the movie The First Wives Club, which I also love.
that is a good
And I
movie.
was
I
like,
do
of
like that.
course that's why. And also great lines,
Oh
right?
yeah,
I'm
uh-huh.
an actress. I have all of them.
The,
That's I me and my old supervisor back when I was an intern when we
yes,
first
uh-huh.
met, he I would say that emotions, I'm an actress, I have all of them.
All of them.
And he wrote Laws of Attraction, and I think that he wrote something
Now, I
else.
know Soap Dish, and I know the First Wives Club. I know the Laws of Attraction. Was that ever made into a film or anything?
Yeah. Those are all
Those are all films, because that
films.
sounded familiar, but it doesn't. I don't think that I've seen that. So,
It stars Pierce Brosnan and Julianne Moore, and he also wrote on the television show GCB. But yeah, I reading that, I was like, oh, of course he wrote The First Wives Club. That's why
mhm.
I love this movie so much. And then the director of Steel Magnolias was Herbert Ross, who
Okay.
was an actor, choreographer. He was on Broadway. He was briefly married to Lee Radziwill,
Oh,
sister of
Jacqueline
Jackie
Kennedy.
O.
Hmm.
Um, but he also directed a bunch of other famous movies like Footloose. He did The Funny Lady, Goodbye
Oh,
Girl, Goodbye Mr. Chips, The Owl and the Pussycat, Boys on the Side is one of the more recent ones
oh,
before he
okay.
died. So a lot of things. And I also there's one other quote that is not a funny one, but I think that it also sort of some is like a major theme of this movie when Julie Roberts as Shelby tells Malin that she's pregnant and Malin is upset.
Oh,
And they're having that whole thing.
right.
And she says something like, I would rather have a moment of wonderful than a lifetime of nothing special, which I think is also a thing. And I think that speaks to like whatever,
Hmm.
as we were talking about before, it there may have been some influence of like marital issues or
Yeah.
whatever in her getting
Hmm.
pregnant, but also it seems like this is ultimately just something she really wanted to do.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right.
Um,
Yeah,
and
I
it
know.
seems like
Mm.
she felt like it was worth whatever risk it had for her health. I just liked that quote. I thought that
It
that
is a
was
nice
like
quote.
a really good piece of dialogue. I think that So that's something I think that we both appreciate about this movie, that just like the dialogue is
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
good. It's like snappy. It manages to feel real, but also still like heightened enough to be entertaining.
Yes.
Um,
It's something that you hope people would say, or but it's not contrived, I don't think. Where
yeah.
like in a something that's written for the stage or whatever it may be,
Hmm.
where you would say real people don't talk like that.
Hmm.
This was real conversation, but you're right, it was witty,
Hmm.
snappy, it was bright, it was incisive, it was and meaningful. So it didn't sound like someone was putting words into their mouth. It sounded like it was really coming from them. And
Yeah.
maybe that's a tribute to the actors as well.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I
That
think for sure that their
yeah, great
delivery is.
cast, a great cast.
Hmm. And they all have such like distinct characters,
Mm,
right? Like it all makes sense that these people are
mm,
hanging out together,
mm-hmm.
but
In all classes.
yeah.
Truvy, who runs a beauty shop, and to Clary, who is evidently very wealthy, wealthy
Hmm.
enough to buy a radio station anyway,
Yeah.
and then Wheezy, who evidently has some money, or
Has more money than God.
and do we ever find out what Tom Skerritt's character does for a living? Because evidently, I mean, he doesn't do too badly, because he's got a nice house beside Wheezy. So
Yeah, yeah, they have a nice house and
yeah,
like
and
managed to have it's big enough to have a full reception in and they're
exactly,
having all sorts of parties.
yeah. So
But
but
yeah, and certainly Malin works at like the local counseling center, so she's not rolling in dough.
right, but it seems like money didn't play a it doesn't play a part in their friendships.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter. It matters who you are, not how much money you make or what you do
Yeah.
for a living.
Yeah, and
So
they all have like these different personalities, but they blend together, right? Like
yeah,
Truvy is sort of friendly and bubbly and she has some funny moments, right? Like there is no such thing as natural beauty.
mm-hmm.
Um, Things like that. Then you have
Or I don't
Annelle,
trust
and
anyone who does their own hair.
yes, I don't trust anyone who does their own hair. Annelle sort of comes into the fold. I will also say the other line that she says that makes me laugh is at that Christmas festival
Mm-hmm.
when her contact falls out and she's like,
Oh
"Nobody
God,
move my contact." Like she makes everyone stop. Nobody move my contact. And obviously like Weezer is like not a nice person, but she like really cares and they all know it. And you have Clary, who's sort of this like gossipy rich woman, and then Malin, who is sort of like the little more grounded, I
right,
guess,
more
of them
down to
all.
earth, and
Hmm.
maybe not, yeah, quite as steeped in the Southern tradition, but still has that background and that upbringing. So
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. But like I said, I think she is still like the emotional center of the group and like of the movie. Like
oh,
even
agreed.
just the moment after Shelby dies when she just immediately gets in her car, which
Oh,
you should not drive when you're that emotional.
mm-hmm.
But when
But
she gets in her car and just goes
to go get her grandson.
to get Jack Jr. and
Yeah,
just opens her arms for him to run into because now like he is who
he's
she
the
has
legacy,
of her
right?
daughter.
Right.
Yeah, no, that part got me. As I said,
Oh
I've been at a
yeah.
funeral recently, so like the all
Well,
that
yeah.
stuff was like oof.
Sure,
Yeah,
it
just
brings.
the image too, I think, like I said, of her being the last one in the room, just
Mm-hmm.
stroking her
Mm-hmm.
hand.
Her
And
hand
the entire time, like she's doing like stretching her body to keep her blood moving.
reading
She's
to her,
reading magazines to her,
and even when
refusing to leave.
yeah, when he says, it'll do you good to get out and eat a real meal, and she goes, "What if she wakes up for 2 minutes and I'm not here?"
Hmm.
And that was her whole thing. It was just like, I know I'm not gonna leave. I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah.
You all do that. And then when she talks, like you said, at the funeral scene where she talks about men are supposed to be steel, they're supposed to
Hmm.
be, tough. And she goes, they couldn't handle it. They couldn't stay
Yeah.
in the room with her. But
Hmm.
she said, but I just, I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave her. Not my Shelby. So
Yeah.
that was very touching. And I thought, very, very poignant about, even like I said, a lot of it to me too was not only just the dialogue, but the facial expressions, or the physical things, putting an arm around someone or something like that, and that sort of thing. When at the funeral, what hit me was when the one son hugged Tom Skerritt. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
right after that, because you really don't see the boys too much, or about how they react and stuff, but you sort of get that feeling at that point, how much they miss their sister. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, yeah, because you see them throughout the whole movie and they're just like goofballs, right?
yeah, and
They're the ones
they're
tying the condoms
teenage
to the
boys.
car. Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
that's what they're supposed to be. But yeah,
yeah. And that's a moment of real like emotion for them. And I think the other thing that I just thought of about the sort of men being steel, the night before the transplant, when they're all playing Go Fish and they all keep making jokes.
about
And Tom Skerritt is like, this is not funny.
yeah,
And they're like, you have any kidneys? Playing Go Fish. And Tom Skerritt's like, that's not funny. And all the rest of them are even Malin, like
yeah,
they're all cracking up. And
and
he
yeah,
just like can't. He
can't
can't
handle it.
do it.
Can't
But I
can't
think,
deal with that.
yeah. But I think for me, like that's sort of like my vibe too. Like if I'm that's terrifying. If you have to go like have a kidney transplant the next day. So
Oh
like
gosh.
I would have to do that.
Oh
If I
yeah,
couldn't make jokes about it, then I would just like
I know.
spontaneously combust.
Exactly. Yeah, I would just start beating my head against the wall or
Right. You're
something.
either
Yeah.
crying all the time or you have to laugh a little bit.
You have to laugh a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think before a kidney transplant, if you're either the recipient or the donor, I don't think you can drink. so so that would be taken out of the equation. So
Yes. Yeah, so
or
you got to just make jokes while you're playing Go Fish.
exactly. Yeah. So yeah, and I thought that was a witty way of inserting that type of gallows humor, I guess you would call it, or
Hmm.
whatever it may be, into the conversation. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
who
And
knows?
I
Maybe they did that before his sister's operation. I don't
hmm
know.
probably,
So
and I imagine a lot of this because like the story follows so I have to imagine that a lot of it came from experience. Like I can definitely see, that kind of thing happening, right?
sure, yeah, where
And
the family gets together.
maybe it was the dad that just like could not, right? Like
Hmm.
he's usually kind of like a goofball.
Yeah, because
But
he seemed,
he couldn't
yeah,
do it.
no. And yeah, you get the feeling. Well, from just looking at him that Shelby's the oldest. She's the
Hmm.
firstborn. So, and that's every time. Not that I ever had children, but every time you talk to a parent, or whatever you talk, the firstborn is always the has a special meaning. It's your first child. So I'm
Hmm.
sure that had something to do with it as well. So.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And like this, I think like the dad daughter thing always has like
Hmm.
a
Like when they
special.
were dancing at the wedding reception, and she
Hmm.
said it was the happiest day of her life, and stuff. And then he goes, "Am I talking too loud?" No, Daddy,
And
you're
she says no.
fine.
Oh yeah. He's so good too. Just
Oh gosh.
at the end at the Easter thing when he says hi to Weezer and she says, "Drum, eat shit and die." And then but the
And
other
I've
part at
said
the
that to
end.
people. So
Yes.
that's
I learned in a movie, I saw someone say that to someone in sign language in a movie. So now I know how to say it in sign
oh,
language too.
ooh, 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 okay, all right.
Yeah.
So
But at that end, when Clarice telling Jack Jr. a story and she makes herself the hero and Weezer the villain,
yeah.
and Weezer comes up, she's like, "It's me, Weezer." And he hits her and cries. It's like
That
it's
is
just continuing on with the next generation.
exactly, yeah.
Um,
Everybody's going to dislike Wheezy
everybody's
Weezer.
mean to Weezer. But yeah, it's I think like I said, it's a movie that I think it feels relatable. I think,
Hmm.
and I think
Even
again,
even today, yes,
yeah.
I agree, because it's about relationships.
Yes, yes. And I think that is always what, like, they always say that, like, what's most specific becomes most universal. And I think that, like, this particular, like, group of women in this, like, fake Southern city and the particular circumstances, right? Those are
Hmm.
maybe not things that people are dealing with, but I think just like the mother-daughter relationships and like the friends and how people kind of interact, I think that all becomes like very relatable. And I think again, especially like a particular kind of like Southern woman or like Appalachian, like that, like country kind of
Yeah,
ladies who get together and are like very caring and will like, make you a casserole if you need it, but they're also maybe gonna like talk a little bit
a little bit of shit
about
about you. Yeah.
about what's going on with you and your family.
Well,
But at the
his
end of the day,
his
they really
brother's
care.
not right.
Yes.
Something like that. So,
Just wild stuff. We were talking about Clary's nephew being gay, but when he told them he had a
oh
brain
my
tumor.
God. That was a
And then he
great
said, just
story.
kidding, I'm gay.
Yeah. I have a brain tumor. Just
And I
kid.
have
Well,
3 months
he always
to
was
live.
dramatic.
And all gay men have track lighting and are named like Mark or Steve. And then Weezer comes in and says, I got track lighting. My
You-
grandson Steve put it
and
in, and they all
and
lose
Shelby
it.
tried not to laugh.
Yes.
Yeah, that was yeah, like yeah, just throughout the whole movie. You're exactly right. If someone hasn't watched the movie, it's worth watching for the performances, but it also pay attention. I think, like you said, to the dialogue and then to the interaction between the characters. There's a lot of subtlety there that I think people might miss on the first go around. So I
Yeah.
certainly did. So.
Agreed. Agreed. I think watching it again this time, I got to see a lot more of like the nuances that I hadn't really noticed before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and like I didn't know before that it was inspired by the story of the writer's sister. And so I think
True events.
that's what probably makes it so like real feeling
Mm-hmm.
because it is.
Yeah, it's not a contrived or something he just thought up out of his imagination. It's something that unfortunately, and it happened to him.
Yeah,
It wasn't even like a story that he read about. It was his story.
right, right. And I think that that also is like a testament because I don't think that everybody can
Oh
take a thing
no,
that happened to them and make it feel so like draw other people in so easily.
right,
And I think
or
that's
even
something he
share
was
it with other people
right.
where because that I can't even imagine what that felt like, losing your sister, to something like that, and then turning around. And although you would say, I'm doing this in her memory or, because of her, but even still, that's has to be very personal and very, you know, tough to deal with, I would think. So
Hmm.
kudos to him. And then kudos to him. Like I said, I didn't know he'd written the other things either. So
Yeah, I might have
quite
the
an
First
impressive
Wives
body
Club.
of work.
First Wives Club might be on my list. I have to look.
Oh, okay.
Because that was a one that I enjoyed when I was a kid, and I think that I would enjoy it rewatching it now even
Mm-hmm.
more. Yeah, I think that he's really talented, and I think
Is he still
um
alive? The author?
he
He's
is.
is
He's
he?
72
Oh, okay. Oh,
in
he's
from Dothan, Alabama.
he's only 5 years older than me.
He's Presbyterian and openly gay.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's why he wrote the gay character in.
Maybe
Maybe.
maybe that's how he told his family.
But
They are like Southern religious people, so
yeah, oh yeah,
maybe he started with the brain tumor and then walked it back into, no, I'm just gay.
So wrapping up then, we both recommend the movie. We both had seen it. So I know it was your
Yes.
pick, but I was familiar with it, but just
Hmm.
in passing. But and
Yeah.
then should we mention that there was another version of this movie done in 2012 for Lifetime?
Yeah, yeah. And I haven't watched that, and I
I have
do want
not
to
either.
watch
I
it.
didn't even know it was a thing until I started looking about this movie. I didn't realize there was another
Yeah. I
version of it.
remember when it came out, like it being a thing. I just hadn't watched it. I think I was starting grad school at the time. It was a crazy time. But yeah, so I hadn't watched it, but I do want to because it's on Lifetime, and it also has like a pretty
It has a very
star-studded
good cast.
cast
It has a great cast. I was just
because
looking at the cast members.
there is okay,
Well,
Queen
Queen Latifah.
Latifah. Yeah, Queen Latifah is Malin in the Sally Field role. Jill Scott as Truvy in the Dolly Parton role. Alfre Woodard is Weezer. Alicia
Mm-hmm.
Rashad is Clary. Adepero Oduye is Annelle. I don't know who she is. And then Condola Rashad, who's Felicia Rashad's daughter, is Shelby in the
Shelby.
Julia Roberts role. So
Okay.
yeah, a lot of good people. So I definitely want to check it out. I got to see where I
Yeah,
can find it online or something or on
I
demand.
wondered about that too because yeah, I'd like to see what they did with if it's a line by line, you know, or if it's if they bring a different take on it,
Yeah. Yeah, that would be good to see. And also because it's interesting because like I mean in the original Steel Magnolias, like everybody's white. The only black people you see are working in the kitchen for the
Exactly.
wedding.
And
Um,
and I don't know. I guess it's supposed to take place in the 80s, so I don't think it was meant to take place in the 60s or anything. So
yeah. But I mean I do think that like this is still how the life is for lots of people. The people you associate with are people like you.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly. So
Yeah,
Now
I
you
don't
watch.
know much about the real place it's filmed in, and it's Natchitoches is how it's spelled, but I know that's not how you say it.
In Louisiana
In Louisiana. So if anybody is from Louisiana or knows how to pronounce it, I'm sorry.
or enlighten us.
Yeah,
Leave us
please.
a comment and or
Nakatosh. It's called Nakatosh.
Nakatosh.
That's how they say it, which doesn't make any sense given the letters that are in it, but I'm
That'd be
sure
kind of
it.
cool. Where are you from? I'm from Nakatosh.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I think that's all we have to say about Steel Magnolias.
Yeah,
So
we both highly recommend it, right?
absolutely,
Yeah,
I think it's a classic. If you haven't seen it, you should.
yeah. It'll
Um,
make you laugh. It'll make you cry, just like the cliches, but yeah, watch it for the performances and listen to the words. So,
yeah, agreed. Well, thank you again for joining us. You can listen to us and follow us on any podcast platform. And you can also follow us on Instagram at Some of Our Parts Pod. I'll put the link in the description. And until next time, bye bye.
take care.